every once in a while, a rookie comes along that's just special. Connor Bedard, Victor Wembanyama. These are generational talents, ready-made superstars with the power to transform their sport. And almost 20 years ago, in one serendipitous twist of fate, the NHL got two of them at the same time. And as soon as they hit the ice, those two prodigies took the hockey world by storm, kicking off two of the most legendary careers the game has ever seen and the most indelible individual rivalry in NHL history. Sometimes in sports, the stars just align. The perfect thing happens at the perfect time with transformative results. In the NBA, for instance, the stars aligned in 1979 when Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, fresh off their unforgettable star-making clash in the NCAA Finals, burst onto the pro scene at the same time, launching the NBA to a new level of popularity. In Major League Baseball, the stars aligned, albeit with some chemical enhancement, in 1998. Over the course of that magical summer, Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa memorably chased down Roger Maris's single-season home run record, winning baseball fans back after the cataclysmic 94-95 strike chased them away. And for the NHL, the stars unquestionably aligned in 2005, when Sidney Crosby and Alexander Ovechkin, two of the most highly touted prospects the game had ever seen, both made their debuts. See, Ovi and Sid weren't destined to be as inextricably linked as they are. Ovechkin, the Russian prodigy who earned comparisons to Mario Lemieux as a teenager, is roughly 2 years older than Crosby. And when he went first overall to the suddenly scuffling Washington Capitals in the 2004 entry draft, Crosby, a Canadian phenom hailed as the next one, had only just finished his tour de force first season with the Rimouski Oceanic. Ovechkin was supposed to arrive first, with Crosby coming later. But then, fate intervened. Or rather, the owners did. In September of 2004, following the expiration of the league's collective bargaining agreement, the NHL's owners locked the players out and indefinitely postponed Ovechkin's much-anticipated debut. 5 months later, with no CBA in place and the owners unwilling to take no for an answer on the issue of implementing a salary cap, the NHL officially canceled the 04-05 season, marking the first time since 1919 that the Stanley Cup wasn't handed out and the first time ever that a major North American pro sports league lost an entire season to a labor dispute. But the lockout also set in motion the simultaneous Ovechkin-Crosby takeover of the NHL. See, by the time the lockout was resolved in the summer of 2005, Crosby was draft eligible. In fact, on the same day the new CBA was approved, the NHL held its frenzied draft lottery to determine, above all else, which team would have the right to select Crosby first overall. In the end, fortune favored the Pittsburgh Penguins, a 1990s powerhouse that had become a basement dweller by the early 2000s. And as the 05-06 season loomed, NHL fans delighted over the impending debut of not just one, but two generational talents. Both exceptionally gifted, and each with their own distinct identity. Ovi was the scorer with the wicked shot, Sid was the playmaker with the uncanny vision. Ovi was the jocular rock star, Sid was the more reserved band manager.
They have been called the NHL's version of Larry Bird and Magic Johnson.
Their contrasting brilliance made them ripe for comparison right off the bat, and as Eastern Conference opponents, the two were poised to square off against one another on the regular. And that particular element is a critical part of their story. Familiarity breeds contempt after all, and Crosby and Ovechkin were primed to get to know each other in a way that Gretzky and Lemieux, for instance, never did. The Great One spent the bulk of his career in the Western Conference, while Lemieux only ever suited up for Pittsburgh. The two legends were ships in the night, playing against one another only 25 times, and exclusively in the regular season. That said, as well positioned as Crosby and Ovechkin were to forge an individual rivalry, nobody could have anticipated how intertwined the two would become. And that kinship was cemented throughout two historic rookie seasons that exceeded even the loftiest of expectations and ultimately launched hockey into a new era. From day one in the NHL, Ovechkin's goal-scoring prowess was a sight to behold. His quest for Gretzky's all-time goals record began less than a period and a half into his NHL debut.
Dinas Zubris spins, Ovechkin fires, he scores! Alexander Ovechkin, welcome on board!
Amazingly, not even 5 minutes later, Ovechkin scored again, becoming the first player in Capitals history with multiple goals in his first NHL game. That same night, however, Crosby turned in an auspicious debut himself. In his first NHL shift, Crosby nearly beat Hall of Famer Martin Brodeur with a backhand and came back to the bench grinning. Then, in the third period, Crosby collected his first NHL point, showcasing his otherworldly passing skills on a nifty setup to Mark Recchi.
Crosby bent one in front, they score! Sidney Crosby bent it to Recchi. Crosby gets his first NHL point.
And just like that, the most compelling Calder Trophy race ever was underway. Following his dazzling debut, Ovechkin recorded points in each of his next 7 games, becoming just the 9th player in NHL history with points in each of his first 8 career contests. Crosby was no slouch himself though. The 18-year-old recorded points in each of his first 6 NHL games, including a 3-point effort in his home debut, in which he also netted his first career goal. Small sample size be damned, it was abundantly clear that these guys were the real deal. A month into the season, both players were averaging over a point per game, while Ovechkin was flirting with the league lead in goals. And in a season defined by newness, new rules, new restrictions on the size of goalie pads, and ultimately a new offensive environment, nothing was more exciting than these two new superstars. And as their first ever NHL matchup against one another approached, the hockey world buzzed with anticipation. It didn't matter that both the Penguins and the Capitals were floundering. Crosby versus Ovechkin, the two future faces of the league doing battle, was must-see TV.
Alex, a special night. Have you been thinking about the fact you're playing Sydney for the first time?
Well, of course I'm thinking about it because everybody talking, everybody reading, and I come here, watch TV, and everybody talking Ovechkin, Crosby, but I think today play not Ovechkin and Crosby, today play Pittsburgh and Washington.
And while both players electrified in the first episode of this burgeoning rivalry, it was Crosby who shined the brightest, lifting Pittsburgh to a 5-4 victory with a multi-point effort, including a dazzling first-period goal.
Say they have the launches, and here's Crosby going right through, trying to get a goal. He shoots and scores as he beats Colsing like a Reddit mule, and the Penguins lead 3-0.
And yeah, it was on. As if galvanized by getting upstaged by Sid in their first meeting, Ovechkin turned up the heat, notching 40 points over his next 25 games, a stretch that included his first NHL hat trick. By the season's midway point, Ovechkin had created some distance between himself and Crosby on the rookie points leaderboard. However, in their second head-to-head matchup in late January, Sid the Kid narrowed that gap with the best performance of his NHL career to date. Crosby recorded his first 4-point game in a beatdown of the Capitals, although, to his credit, Ovechkin did account for Washington's lone goal that night. And when the Penguins and Capitals squared off again in DC a few weeks later, Crosby again outplayed Ovi, recording multiple points to propel Pittsburgh to a third straight victory over Washington. And as February's hiatus for the 2006 Olympic Games neared, trying to determine which rookie was having the superior season was exceedingly difficult. Ovechkin had a narrow lead in goals and points, but Crosby had thoroughly outshined him head-to-head. And speaking of those Olympic Games, they provided another platform for Ovechkin to dazzle on. He earned All-Star honors for the tournament and memorably scored the game-winning goal for Russia in the quarterfinals to knock Canada out of the tournament. That one must have stung for Crosby, who was inexplicably left off Team Canada's Olympic roster. And when the NHL season resumed, Crosby, as if motivated by his Olympic snub, only upped his remarkable pace. Over the final stretch of the 05-06 season, even with his team well out of playoff contention, Crosby arguably played his best hockey of the year. Across his last 23 contests, Crosby recorded a whopping 37 points. In fact, from the Olympic break through the end of the regular season, Crosby's point total was tied for second in the NHL. Who was he tied with, though? Alex Ovechkin. After coming back from the Olympics, Ovechkin averaged almost a point and a half per game for the remainder of the season. Along the way, he also managed to upstage Sid for the first time head-to-head, notching a goal and a pair of assists in a late-season victory over Pittsburgh. All told, Ovechkin finished the season with 106 points, good for third in the NHL. Crosby's final count? 102. Nail-biter, eh? Respectively, those mind-boggling totals landed them third and fifth on the NHL's single-season leaderboard for points by a rookie. Their joint assault on the record books also marked the first time ever that two rookies reached 100 points in the same season. Meanwhile, Ovechkin's 52 goals were tied for third most in the league and made him the fourth rookie in NHL history to reach 50. Yet, overall, Crosby had outplayed Ovechkin when they squared off against one another. Crosby's Penguins took the season series over Ovi's Capitals 3-1, and Sid had outproduced Ovechkin in those 4 games, 9 points to 6. That said, for the Professional Hockey Writers Association, there was little debate as to which player had the superior season. In the end, Ovechkin received all but 5 first-place votes for the Calder Trophy, comfortably beating out Crosby for the league's top rookie honor. And with that, the first chapter in the Ovechkin-Crosby rivalry came to a close, but their impact on the game was already readily apparent. That season, the NHL saw a bump in attendance of almost 2.5%, establishing a new per-game record of almost 17,000 fans. Meanwhile, revenues exceeded the league's projections by hundreds of millions of dollars. And while some of that can perhaps be tied to the fans' increased appetite following a year-long lockout, and arguably more entertaining gameplay on account of the new rules, the effect of the Crosby-Ovechkin takeover can't be overstated. And that was just the beginning. Over the ensuing years, Crosby and Ovechkin continued to exceed the incredible expectations placed on them, provided the NHL with 2 eminently marketable stars, eventually established themselves as future Inner Circle Hall of Famers, and ultimately cemented their individual rivalry as the greatest the game has ever seen. And as their legacies grew, so too did the intensity of their matchups, which, as of 2023, include 4 postseason series against one another. On each occasion, it should be noted, the winning team went on to take home the Stanley Cup. And today, almost 2 decades removed from their debuts, the rivalry between Crosby and Ovechkin, the twin engines of the modern NHL, remains as captivating and as essential to the league as ever. Frankly, it's hard to imagine the NHL without them. But no matter when they hang them up, no matter how many cups they each end up winning, and no matter where they end up on the all-time points leaderboard, Crosby and Ovechkin will forever be mentioned in the same breath as the 2 modern-day legends who dazzled from day one.
Thanks for watching. If you like this video and want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button.